Hi, this is Dr. Betsy, and we're here with another week of Body, Mind, Spirit. Today, I'm very excited. We talked to him last season, and he was so awesome. We're bringing him back. So we have America's holistic gynecologist, Dr. Sean Tassone. Hey, Dr. T, thanks for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me back.
So, we were actually just talking before we even started about just the hormones. Hormones are just, everyone's concerned about hormones. I know that even in my practice, I get patients that come in all the time and they're just like, I'm depressed, I want hormones. I'm like fat, I want hormones. I have no sex drive, I want hormones. What what would you like to say about like those kind of requests and are hormones the answer for everything?
Simple answer, no. Obviously not the answer to everything, but I do think that they are a piece of the answer to everything. For women, especially, men and women, we all have the same hormones. It's just in women, yours fluctuate a lot more than ours do, and you have them in, except for testosterone, much higher concentrations usually. And the other thing is we talk about balance, and that's a semantic thing. A lot of our colleagues, other gynecologists on Instagram and the internet, are kind of bashing people for saying hormone balance isn't a real thing. And there are times in a woman's life when hormone imbalance is normal. Puberty, menopause, perimenopause, and the menstrual cycle, which is pretty much your whole life. So it could be normal to have an imbalance. However, when I'm talking about hormone imbalances, I'm talking about it's interfering with the way that you want to live your life. Like you're too tired, you can't function. No sex drive is usually an end result of not just testosterone, but relationships and stress and a lot of things, body image and all that. So, but is this interfering with how you want to live your life? And if it is, that's when I get involved.
Yeah, and a lot of times I also get the question, well, why can't you just check my levels and then tell me what I need to do? So what is it about, how do you look into hormone balance or someone's hormonal, I guess, where they are with their hormones?
Well, I kind of look at hormones a little bit different. First of all, if I'm looking at labs, it's always, I use the analogy like normal versus abnormal. So you're in the house or you're not in the house. And if you're in the house, that's normal. But then where are you in the house? So you could be laying on the floor in the basement, which doesn't necessarily feel very good, but it's still quote unquote normal. Then you ask, like, well, okay, so now you tell me that I have estrogen dominance or low testosterone or whatever. How do I fix it? Because what I found was if I started talking about things, sometimes you get blank stares. So what I found was the more that I would talk about hormone imbalance as a story, as a narrative. So like with low testosterone, I talk about an archetype of the nun, which is what my book is about. And then how does a nun become an issue? Well, nuns, if they're cloistered, meaning if they're staying inside all the time because they don't want to go out and do anything, which is testosterone deficiency. I've often said if it was a t-shirt, it would just say meh, like you just don't care. And that's when it's a problem. So I have a 6-step process for each of these hormone imbalances that I call SHINES, because you always got to have a cool acronym. So I call it SHINES, which is a spiritual practice, hormonal manipulation, infoceuticals, which is kind of a fancy way of just kind of saying energetic aspects of medicine for people that are interested in like essential oils and acupuncture and things like that, nutrition, exercise, and then proper supplementation. And from those 6, you can choose whichever one, but only one of those 6 steps do you need a physician for, and that's the hormonal part. The other 5 are all self-care.
I love that. And I love that connection because I think that a lot of times everybody thinks that, your body, that you're like living in this bubble and I'll find, talk to patients and they're like, well, I'm eating right and I'm exercising. Why do I still feel like crap? But like you were saying, if you don't have some other balance in their lives when it comes to like mental and spiritual, it's not going to work.
And I think people get confused with spiritual they confuse it with religious, and it doesn't. When I talk about spiritual practices for hormonal balance, it might be like for high cortisol or archetypes that I call workaholics. Sometimes, yeah, the spiritual practice for them is to learn how to say no. And so it doesn't have to be like, it's not a religious thing. It could be like for the nun, getting outside. I have a friend that wrote a book called Earth Walks, and they're like 113 walking meditations. And so for a nun or a low testosterone, I just want you outside. I want you to maybe get outside for a half an hour, and don't let yourself be cloistered in the house. And so it that's where you incorporate I think the mind body is really getting away from definitions, but then also realizing everybody has their own definition of spirituality and a spiritual practice, where for some it could be prayer. That's great. But for others, it might be their church's nature. And so it's just getting you out and doing that. Or for a woman with estrogen dominance, which I call the queen, I jokingly say, you could be a benevolent queen, or you could be an off with your head type queen. And estrogen dominance can make you feel like you're off with your head. And a spiritual practice for a queen, what makes a good queen is being surrounded by good advisors, people that can help you. So surround yourself with family and friends that can sympathize with you and help you around the house and do the things that you need help with, rather than trying to do it all on your own.
This is amazing. So you have all this mapped out in your book, which we see in the background is the Hormone Balance Bible, which I highly recommend. This is a great read. You need to get it. So, and how many other archetypes do you have total in the book?
There's 12. It's funny because I tried not to. There's 3 of them that are combinations of 2 of the others. And I could have probably made more. The publisher, because the book's like 500 pages, was trying to get me to only have 6. And I was like, I can't just do 6. I got to have 12. And so, but usually it's because of the 6 hormones that I focus on: cortisol, thyroid, testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen. They all have a high and a low that can cause problems. And, sometimes, and sometimes there's a combo. So like, a good example is a wise woman is what I call estrogen deprivation, because those women are usually menopause. And the nun, which is testosterone deficiency, if you combine a nun with a wise woman, you get a philosopher. And so the philosophers are those 2. But the thing is like the book, the way that's laid out is that it talks about, first of all, there's a quiz you can take to find out maybe which one of those you are, if you don't have time to go get labs drawn, because nothing's better than labs. But the way the book's laid out is that it talks about patient examples. I think people resonate really well with other people. And that's the beauty of this book. I've had many women ask me, why would I want to read a book about hormones that a guy wrote? Well, it's not from me. It's from the 40,000 women that I've sat with over the years. And I think my superpower, and my ex-wife might disagree with this, is listening. I do think that that's what doctors should do. I think we as physicians should be more passive and the patients should be more active. And if you just listen, what I noticed over the last 20 years is that I was hearing really similar stories. And so all I did was combine these thousands and thousands of stories into these 12 narratives.
That is great. And I think also what's fascinating about you is that you don't just have your medical degree, but you actually have a degree in, was it transformation?
Well, it's the degree is actually philosophy.
Philosophy, okay.
But what I focused on, and that was a whole journey after my mom passed away. I just, I'm only child. I needed to figure this out, whatever all this is, and I grew up Catholic. And so I had that whole background, but when somebody close to you dies and you watch them die. I mean, I was there. And I remember you turn around and you're walking out of the room and you're like, this is literally the last time I'm going to physically see that body again, ever in this lifetime, which is rather profound when you actually are in that situation. And you have to leave at some point. But then I realized as I was standing there, that body, whatever that is, laying in that bed that's no longer my mom. Whatever animated her, whatever made her who she was, the crazy, the loving, the overprotective, all that stuff. That's like an energy, a spirit that it can't be destroyed. It's got to go somewhere. And so that was what that whole journey was. So what I did was I went to different countries around the world, and Guatemala and Mexico and Italy and all these places, and Brazil. And I just kind of worked with indigenous shamanic healers for a couple of weeks at a time. And what I really discovered, to my great satisfaction, was that there is something out there that I can't explain. I have no explanation for it, but we can heal. We can heal ourselves without medications. We can heal with prayer. We can heal with meditation. We can even heal at distances immediately sometimes, the spontaneous remissions and whatnot. So I don't even pretend to know what most of it is, but there's definitely something else out there.
That's always like shocks me when I would talk about like belief and how that affects the body. And I'm finding that as I get on in my medical career, that, if someone has a bad attitude and they're coming in, like maybe that would be like be deficient in spirit, maybe, but if they have a bad attitude, I could give them the best therapies in the world that are backed by studies. But if they don't believe it's going to work, it's just not going to work. And so that always surprises me, how, this belief or this energy can actually heal, but also can cause disease too.
Yeah. And, there's a HeartMath, which is a company that does heart rate variability, which maybe you'll talk about on one of your episodes. But the more that your heart rate accelerates and decelerates as we breathe, the more swing in that, the more healthy you are and the more happy you are. And this is scientifically proven. And what's interesting is they did a study that was really fascinating. They had like 5 people in a room, and they had heart rate variability monitors on, and they were all talking and laughing, and everybody's heart rate variabilities were really up and swinging, which is healthy. They introduced somebody to the room that was having a really bad day, like a stressful day. They didn't say anything. They didn't talk. They just came in with a scowl on their face. And the other 5 people, their heart rate variabilities changed and actually got worse with that other person in the room. And so it's a very powerful concept to think that even just your mood without saying anything can affect the people within your energetic, we all have energy, obviously, and people always kind of scoff at that, but an EKG, which measures heart rate, is energy. It measures electrical impulses, EEGs for the brain. We are energetic. So it's not weird to think that we're emitting pulses of energy all the time, and we can affect other people.
With that too, I want to go back with the hormones is, how can our energy be affecting our hormones and how we're feeling?
So the infoceutical part of my 6-step process, there's a friend of, I don't know if you know him very well. He's a part of the group that we're in Mindshare, Harry Massey. He has a company called NES Health. And what Harry did through his own personal journey was a lot of work with imbibing water with energetic impulses from acupuncture points. We know acupuncture is legitimate. I mean, it's many studies that show that it works for fertility and all kinds of things, pain and whatnot. And we don't know how or why it works, but it's energetic. That's what it works on. And so to think that hormones are just glands, so they receive a signal from the brain to a gland, and the hormone is what sends the signals to the end organs. So to think that they're not coming from an energetic aspect, when how does the brain talk to the ovaries? I mean, it's sending energetic signals and hormones. And so if your energy is messed up, and I know this sounds very woo-woo, but it's not something we can measure. And I think that's why it kind of bothers some people. We can't just physically measure it. But I have people that use Harry's system, which is a water. It's kind of homeopathic in nature because that's how homeopathy works. It's the energetic aspect of the treatment. Then for some it works. Now for others it may not work. And my point being is, I guess for me, it's like, I think we'll find out in years down the road that we're probably 99.9% energetic, and what this physical body is probably 1% actual matter, and the rest is like just air. But it's what we can see, and it's how we interact, because our brains can't comprehend that yet.
That is amazing. And I'm going to talk about more of this when we come back from the break.
80% of women will develop a pelvic health condition at some point in their lives. There is relief. There is hope. The Pelvic Floor Store, your resource for personal health.
And we're back with Dr. Shawn Tassone. Thank you so much. So we were talking before the break about energy and matter in our bodies. I wanted to ask you too, that if you could explain to me the effects of stress on our hormones and how we're feeling, because I would say, especially in the last year, I mean, I think normally people are under a lot of stress, but this last year with coronavirus and quarantine, and I think we've seen much higher levels of emotional stress, from being socially isolated to financial stress with people like losing their jobs or having to work from home. So have you seen this, especially in your clinic, affecting your patients and their hormones?
Oh, sure. And it's so multifaceted, the stress part, from obviously the direct effect of the stress to changing nutrition habits and weight gain, to increasing cortisol levels and issues with sleep, and all of these things are tied to hormones, I think. You've got, if you're stressed, when I was in the military, when I got out of my residency, I had a 4-year military payback, and we had 5,000 new female troops show up for basic training, and all of them had screwed up periods. And it's because they were in this new environment. They were exercising like crazy. They were up at the break of dawn. They were stressed out. They were away from their families. And inevitably, everybody had vaginal discharge because it was in the middle of Oklahoma and it was 100 degrees out and they're wearing fatigues. And 2, periods were out of whack. And so naturally, as most physicians do, you just put them on a birth control pill. But if you really dig deep into there, what we're finding is we're throwing the hormonal system is, as you know, super intricate, but it's not necessary for life. You need cortisol, you need thyroid, or you'll die. But estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHA, you don't have to have it. Okay? You just don't have to have it. And so, but it takes a lot of energy for your body to run that. So if you're super stressed, your body's got to digest food, it's got to run the brain, run the heart, and do all those things. So it's going to not give the energy to the hormones because it can't expend all that because it's trying to deal with other stuff. So that's why I think the hormones go out. And for women, the first thing that goes is ovulation. So when you're stressed and you don't ovulate, you don't make progesterone. Progesterone upregulates a receptor in the body called GABA, which calms you down. So it makes sense that not only are you stressed, but your hormones are now in a situation where your anxiety levels can go up because of the hormonal deficiency. Add that on top of the COVID stress, and that can just make anxiety go through the roof. So I'm seeing that all over the place.
Do you see that more so with women who are also menopausal or perimenopausal with anxiety?
I had a 63-year-old yesterday that has been, I don't know, for 12 years, she's had a horrible time sleeping. She's on Ambien, she's on all these prescriptions, and no one's ever once offered her progesterone. And so I put her on progesterone, and she's like, I talked to her 2 weeks later. I've seen her a few times, but yesterday I was just checking in with her, and she's like, I'm off my Ambien, which to me is way safer progesterone than Ambien. There's no addiction there. And it's just because we're giving her, see, this is the problem. And there's two problems here. One is we live a lot longer now than we used to. 100, 200 years ago, menopause wasn't as big a deal because we didn't live that long. We've lived so much longer, so much faster that evolution just hasn't had a chance to catch up. But what we're doing, the second problem in medicine, is we're making women just tough it out. And we treat them differently in the medical system. We know this. We just do. And it's all in your head. You're just getting older, all those excuses. And we're afraid to prescribe hormones because of the Women's Health Initiative that came out 15 years ago that said what we already knew and is about synthetic hormones, not about bioidenticals anyways. So can we really correlate it? Probably not. But I've seen so many thousands of women sleep better, calm down, feel better with just simple progesterone that costs $2 to $10 a month with your insurance. I mean, it can change lives. I mean, imagine not sleeping. How horrible is that?
And you bring up a really good point about the synthetic versus the natural hormones. If you could explain that a little bit.
So bioidenticals, not to get confused, they still have to synthesize those. They make them from plants. When we say bioidentical versus synthetic, what I mean is bioidentical, if you are able to see the structure of the compound, it looks the same as your body's natural hormone. Whereas a synthetic looks close, but it's not quite as good. Now, the problem with that is that those they still fit the lock, but they actually might hit it harder than a real hormone, than a bioidentical hormone. So like birth control pills and Premarin, they actually would sometimes hit that receptor 7 times harder than a normal estrogen would. And that's why I think we saw increases in breast cancer and uterine cancers and things like that, was because these neuroendocrine disrupting agents actually are stronger. It's like morphine and fentanyl. Fentanyl is 100 times stronger than morphine, but they're in the same kind of category. And so you're getting something really similar. So synthetics like Premarin was made from horse urine. So the reason that we don't see a lot of bioidenticals on the market is because of the patenting. You can't patent estrogen because it's natural. It's like saying you can't patent calcium but what you can patent is your delivery system or your dosing. So you have bioidentical patches now, which actually work really well. But you can't have just a straight old estradiol patent. That's why it's generic. And so you can do bioidentical hormones that are big pharmacy, and they're still bioidentical. So I think people get confused there. It doesn't have to be compounded. I just like compounded because I can give the dose that I want to give.
I think that's a really good point, because I see that happen all the time, that patients automatically think it has to be compounded, and there are some great bioidentical options, on the market. So, and then, that always brings me up to, I have not seen any good options for bioidentical when it comes to birth control. So it would be
because
nice.
You can't, I personally think, like I just talked about with the hitting that receptor harder, I think that the bioidentical dosage that you would need to use would be so much higher that you probably would then start running into complications with just high doses of hormones. Because in order to interrupt that hypothalamic pituitary axis, I think you have to have higher levels in the bloodstream, because I have a lot of perimenopausal women that I have on hormone replacement that still ovulate. So it's not birth control. I think that in order to make it I think it's just got to be a super high dose of bioidenticals or these synthetics that just act differently in the body.
Yeah. And when it comes to, I'm going to bring up birth control since you're mentioning it, when I always get the question from patients, like, when should I come off of it? I think that's like $1 million question.
Well, I think here's what I always say to that question. First of all, if you're perimenopausal or if you have surgical menopause, the average age of menopause is 51. So I would say let's at least use it until then, because you're supposed to have it at least until then. Then the question is, are we looking at symptoms? Are we looking at benefits? So if you want to come off of the hormones and you feel fine, then you don't need them. I mean, because it's quality of life we're talking about. However, it does help protect bones. We know estrogen and testosterone combination therapies really help with bone density, and it helps with cardiovascular system and lipids and things like that. So it does have benefits outside of just hot flashes, mood swings, irritability, and things like that. So I always ask women this. It's like, how long have you felt miserable? How long do you want to feel good? I would say at least on average, probably 2 to 3 years is pretty standard. And then if you want to start trying to decrease the doses, we can do that. And some women can come down 50% and they feel the same. That's great. Some women have to go longer. So it really just depends on the patient. I have some 80-year-olds that are still on hormones. And then I have women that are in their 60s and they're fine. They wean off and they don't have any issues. And we get a DEXA scan every 2 years to make sure they're not losing bone density. And, just keep an eye on it.
And there's always the other question that comes up here is, oh, hormones. I'm scared of them because they cause cancer. So what would you say?
I did a podcast with Alan Christensen, who's a friend of ours, and because he talks about medical myths in his podcast. And my whole episode was on estrogen doesn't cause breast cancer, because if it did, then every woman would get breast cancer, and every guy, because we all have estrogen. So that's not true. Estrogen can stimulate a cancer cell that has an estrogen receptor on it, so that's a possibility. But breast cancer is caused by what you eat, what you drink, where you live. Have you ever been pregnant? Have you ever breastfed? And estrogen detoxification pathways are one of those. So if you're a woman who has a family history or a personal history of breast cancer, and we do say like a Dutch test, and we can figure out how you detoxify your estrone. There are certain pathways, some women will actually make more of what's called 4-methoxyestrone, which is more carcinogenic. It can damage DNA. We can push you to a 2-methoxy pathway that actually might be more protective by using DIM or cruciferous vegetables. So there's things you can look at, but yeah, directly estrogen doesn't cause breast cancer.
Yeah, I think that's great. So where can people find out more information about you and your book?
The book's for sale everywhere: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of your big booksellers. I'm on Instagram, Sean Tassone MD, so I have a lot of information on there. And then my website is tassonemd, TASSONEMD.com.
And I've been following you on Instagram. You've been doing some fun videos.
I've been doing some TikToks. They're not as story driven as yours with the Olympics, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, I know. I got a really good response to that now that people are asking for more, and I'm like, oh no, now I got to come up with more ideas.
Yeah, you're more of a character actor. I'm more of a 9-second kind of guy.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. And I just wanted to remind people to go definitely check out Dr. Tassone's website, get his book. Also, if you enjoy the programming that you're seeing today, make sure you visit wytv7.org. You can see our other programs, and also don't forget to donate. Your donations not only help us bring great programs like this one today, but also help us support the community. And you'll be able to go on our website and you can see all the different community activities that we're involved in. Also, if you'd like to just know more about health, wellness, especially women's issues, check out my website, Dr. Betsy Greenleaf. Definitely follow me on social media. You can see my Olympic videos that I did recently. And don't forget to come back next week at 8:00 Eastern and for more of Body, Mind, Spirit. And I'll see you again next week. So thank you so much, Dr. Tassone.